Good afternoon and welcome to the program International Forum, where we look at issues on the foreign scene and see how respite can be brought in terms of the issues surrounding the international stories. And today we are looking at Russia and Prigozhin Yevgeny, where it was said that Yevgeny committed an act of mutiny against Russia by staging an insurrection by sending convoy of armored vehicles against Moscow. Well, it was halfway where Moscow, where the Wagner boss later turned back the troops after getting close to Moscow. Well, looking at this, the leader of the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, has said that he's going to ensure that investigations are taken and then punishment will be meted out on those involved in the Wagner group. And looking at all of this, we'll be having discussants with me in the studio, starting from my extreme immediate left, where I have a lecturer, University of Benin, a political scientist, and the person of Neville Obakedo. Thanks for coming, Neville.
Good afternoon, viewers and listeners at home. Thank you, ITV, for having me this great afternoon.
And next to him is a legal practitioner, Emmanuel Obakbolo. Thanks for joining me.
It's a delight being here. Good afternoon.
And of course, I have a political economics erudite at that, and he is Ibrahim Momo. Thanks for coming, Ibrahim.
Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, Nigeria.
All right, I would like to start with you, Ibrahim, looking at the issues surrounding the insurrection as being said by the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, against Yevgeny, Prigozhin, on what transpired. What's your take in that direction?
Well, thank you very much. It's in the order of things, really, that sometimes Frankenstein, every time he creates a monster, the monster can sometimes attempt, to eat up its creator. That is one of the simplest way I think you can put it, that the Wagner group, as headed by Prigozhin, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was a creation of Vladimir Putin. It was like a pariah army that he uses for special assignments. All the places you have Russia's fingerprints in Africa, it is not the Russian army that is there. It is the Wagner group.
Oh.
When they fought to keep the Russian president, Bashar al-Assad, in power, it was not the Russian army that went there.
The Syrian
it was not the Russian army that went to assist the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad. It was the Wagner group. In fact, in the special military exercise that's going on in Ukraine, what the world is calling a war or an invasion, Russia calls it the special military exercise. It is more or less being championed, particularly in the Donetsk region. The Donetsk region. What you are seeing there mostly is the imprints of the Wagner group.
Wagner group.
It is not because the Russian army is reputed to be the third largest in the world. So it's not as if they do not have enough troops. It is just that, sometimes there's what we call plausible deniability. War crimes can be meted against not just the perpetrators, but the commanding officers. So maybe to create a kind of immunity for prosecution, that special purpose vehicle, the Wagner group, was created. And it has the backing and support of the Russian president. But what I have seen, and I find very disturbing, is the fact that there seems to be a calculated disinformation exercise going on in the Western media, with all due respect to to the likes of CNN, Sky News, BBC, and if you may, Al Jazeera, where you hear in a report that they will tell you that there is a 5-mile-long convoy of trucks and
armored vehicles,
armored tanks and personnel. But every time you are seeing only one truck or two trucks. And then,
how do you call that a convoy?
a 5-mile-long convoy. And then again you hear that they were marching on Moscow. But the Yevgeny Prigozhin, his primary aim or purpose or goal, what his request was that the defense chief should be sacked because he ordered an airstrike on some of his forces.
Troops, yeah.
Yeah, so that was why, that's all he asked for. And then...
So it was like a protest?
Yeah, in fact, there was no mention of Putin or of a coup. The only thing they said was that they are demanding the removal of the defense chief.
Shogi.
And then it wasn't removed. Before the end of our day, we're hearing again that the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, had convinced him to go on exile, originally agreed him to go on exile to Belarus, and that the Russian state will not press any charges against him. So, for one, it could be what you can call, the more you look, the less you see. In another way, it could also be that this is the first time there's a threat to the sovereignty or the power of a one-time strongest man in the world, Vladimir Putin. Now, whatever it is, I think it's, for us in the international arena, you know, it's always like comic relief when we see the shenanigans going on in the international system. So that's my initial take.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's get your view in that regard, Emmanuel Obakwalo.
Just like my co-panelist said here just now, I want to consider what happened few days, particularly on Saturday in Russia, as somebody playing the script of another.
Oh,
that is my opinion. I haven't taken time to read and also to watch some video clips of what really transpired and the reports on the international media. You would agree with me that there seems to be a drama, and all is to, in my opinion, is to give the international community a different ride of what is really transpiring.
So it's fishy.
Yes. So, because just like he said, I watched Putin giving 5 minutes address to Russians and also to the whole world. 5 minutes address for what they tagged mutiny. 5 minutes address. I don't think there was really any threat to him and to Russia. If not, it can't just be a 5 minutes address, because at the end of the day, you see as if there was a card or a chess game being played by Putin at this time, maybe to give the international community
an impression
of what is not really happening. And before you know, where some persons will be beginning to say, okay, let us just cross our hands and fold our hands and cross our legs.
There's another strike.
To see, then the man will hit hard on his target, which is Ukraine. So I want to really, I am disturbed because of the way everything played out and how his ally, one of his strong ally, the Belarusian president, now asking
Lukashenko,
the Wagner group leader, Prigozhin,
yeah,
to now come to Belarus as a safe haven for him. I begin to wonder. I now discover that, really, it's not what we are thinking. Because if it is what we thought or what we are thinking, it shouldn't be one of his closest allies that should be giving a sign of relief or an escape route to who Putin tried to be his enemy just now. Meanwhile, this the Wagner group has been an extension of Putin, just like what we saw in Animal Farm, where Snowball and Napoleon claimed to be partners to defeat the human character in that play. And at the close of the day, we saw how Napoleon himself groomed the 7 puppies. The 7 puppies became voracious dogs, and they chased out Snowball from the animal farm, and he took over. Before you know, the 7th commandment were changed. I think that is the kind of game Putin is trying to play. So I think the international community, particularly the Western world and NATO, should watch out.
Thank you very much for that expression. You just made mention of it that this could be like a way of giving a wrong impression, you know, for them to buy into it. And before you know it, something dastardly happens. But let's look at your viewpoint, Neville Obakedo, because some have said that, contrary to what Emmanuel said, some have said that this could be an end of the Russia fight against Ukraine, as there could be an element that could bring about implosion, you know, within the Russia military, you know, that will weaken the forces, you know, against fighting Ukraine. Do you see that, looking at what the other discussants have said?
In the first instance, the Yevgeny Prigozhin's attempt to march on Moscow and the interpretations from various perspectives by analysts and scholars and even ordinary commentators on the street. They are pointers to the fact that the war on Ukraine by the Russian Federation, being led by Vladimir Putin, is still ongoing. And the end is not in sight
At all.
But as a student of international politics and conflict analysis, I've taken time to read and listen to Vladimir Putin, his speeches, and I've seen that only one thing that he has been doing as president, he has been promoting nationalism, national interest, which is the interest of himself and the interest of those that subscribe to his perspective of leadership, including including Dmitry Medvedev, who was one time president and later prime minister. Now, whatever is happening now, it is the national interest of the Russian Federation as carved by Vladimir Putin that is playing out. Now, we know that several countries, in the advanced world, they allow private military organizations or companies to operate in the name of mercenary, like this Wagner mercenary group.
Yeah.
From where people, other countries may enter into military alliances with these powerful nations, and when they are having conflict, they will now release part of these mercenaries to those countries to go and fight there. And this is what Russia has successfully done in several places like Syria and other parts of the world. Now, based on my understanding of the speeches and the actions of Vladimir Putin, one thing is clear, that even the Russian Federation, the citizens, ordinary citizens of the Russian Federation, are divided over his leadership. And there are enemies, citizens that are enemies within the Russian state. And they have tried, even at different occasions, to unseat Vladimir Putin through the democratic process. And they have not been able. Some of them have been brutally dealt with by Putin. Some of them are kept incommunicado and in the gulags of Vladimir Putin's Russia as we speak. Now, what is the challenge that the Wagner group or the group that is led by Yevgeny Prigozhin is talking about? He's talking about shortage of arms for their members to carry out.
Yeah, for the troops.
Yes, to continue this onslaught on Ukraine. Number
So
two,
demanding for ammunition,
yes,
for arms from
number
the
two,
Russian government.
the onslaught, the killings of their troops and the conventional Russian troops by Ukrainian forces, and several other demands.
Okay, but was that necessary to have, you know, staged an insurrection of that crime.
You see, in military and local police balance, any attempt that you make to register your displeasure with the present state of things is always counted as mutiny. The other day, a student of ours, a part-time student of ours, came to me in the office, maybe because of my disposition towards maybe try to alleviate the sufferings of people, and maybe it's an element of activism, fighting for people's right and my own right as well. He now came and said that somebody was arrested at the police station. We now got to the station, a close by station. We now got to the station, we saw some policemen, then one other person that came with us. We were not discussing, three of us were not discussing. I don't know what the statement that the policeman said he made. He just grabbed him inside the station. He was dragging him. I said, why are you dragging this man? He said the man just committed an offense of mutiny.
Wow.
So as he was dragging him, I said,
as a way of digression.
Yes, as he was dragging, I said, let me go and look for it. And I went to go and meet the DPO. I said, DPO, I don't want to cause crisis in this your station. You better tell that so policeman to let that my person who followed me to this station off the hook. So DPO that came outside and invited us. What was the problem? We now explained. The DPO was like saying that what he did or what we did in their own police language was mutiny.
To mutiny.
Yes, and that is a law that was carved by the colonial masters, which they have not changed. And that's why soldiers today, when they protest, maybe the allowances are not given to them. The next thing they will say they mutinied, and then they court martial them, either dismiss them, or put them in life imprisonment, or they execute them, depending on the level. Now, when somebody is talking about mutiny, because the Russian Federation, as it is, even though we don't have a military head of state here, it's a militarized state. So anything that have to do with a threat to that militarization is
seen as mutiny.
Apply military law and say it's a mutiny.
So which means that action passes for it? Yes,
that action in a war situation and the military balance passes for an insurrection or an attempted coup. It's a treasonable offense. Attempting to overthrow the government. Whether you attempted to overthrow the government from what they call that town where they started their protest movement, Rostov on Don. Yes. Yeah. If whether you started from there and ended in Moscow, or you started in Leningrad or Stalingrad or in any other place, a mutiny is mutiny.
Even reports have it that he took over Rostov on Don. And
yes, so
that has a location of about over 1 million people.
Yeah, they overran
because the military command of Russia, is based in there, and it took over that. So that again, intensifies the act of mutiny.
Taking over the city is a statement to Putin. It's a statement to Putin in the sense that sometimes when you are fighting war, when you are fighting war,
the military grip.
Yes, when you are fighting war, and the soldiers do not see any reason why they are fighting, but they have to obey the last command. That they are not seeing somebody that is a liberator. They are normally going to keep calm and allow you to have your way. You the mutineer.
All right. So let us swing.
Yeah. So when you take a critical look at what Putin is doing, there are leaders and there are leaders. In every developmental epoch or every historical epoch of a country, you have different leaders. This man is a different leader for the Russian Federation. Before him, we had Boris Yeltsin. Then before the dissolution of the defunct Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, we had Mikhail Gorbachev, and so on. Now, these leaders were nationalistic, trying to maintain the status quo of the world, which was a two-power world, that's a bipolar world. But now we have a multipolar world. And according to Putin's national interest for Russia is a reunification of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Those states that were in those republics that were part of the defunct USSR, states like Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Georgia, Latvia, Uzbekistan,
Ukraine.
Yes, Ukraine, Moldova, all of them. His intention is to ensure that they are reintegrated back into a kind of alliance and agreement where Russian influence of the era of the USSR remains paramount, whether it's Russian influence that is political, whether it's Russian influence at the United Nations, whether it's Russian influence economically, technologically, and so on. And this is exactly what Putin is trying to push to the whole world, that any attempt by the United States led NATO and the alliance that they have with the European Union to now want to now have alliances and military bases with the countries of the default USSR, then the world peace will be compromised. And because, according to him, it is an attempt to undermine the Russian Federation and the old USSR. That is why these alliances are being entered into. And that's exactly the message he's trying to pass across to the world. And those who seek solutions to this problem should also look at it from that angle, because to him, it is a deliberate attempt to legislate, in quote, out of existence, the default USSR and the Russian Federation. Okay. And in his lifetime, according to him, he will never allow that to happen.
Okay, thank you very much. A lot you've just said, and it goes a long way to also see the act of testing the strength of the military of Russia. You know, is another act that really the leader, the president, you know, is really frowning against. And you made mention of the fact that, you know, all of these issues, you know, if not checked, you know, could go a long way. And again, I also said that is this not capable of causing an implosion? You made mention of decent voices, you know, arising from all of this. But we're going to be taking a short break, after which you're going to be anchoring on that, Ibrahim Momo. So we'll take a short break. Do stay. Thanks for staying on. And I still have my guests with me on the program International Forum, Neville Obakedo, a lecturer at University of Benin, and Emmanuel Obakpolo, a legal practitioner, and of course Ibrahim Momo, a political economist. Now, let's deepen this conversation looking at the possible threats. You know, this is really deepening towards, like I said earlier to Neville Obakedo, if this will bring about an implosion, as some have said, that all of this, you know, having one of the Russian leaders' machinery going against it. We saw in the video, you know, in the visuals where the convoy, you know, was really heading towards Moscow. But you smiled over that as if it wasn't really important and showing a sign of mutiny. What's your reaction about that?
Well, when I heard convoy, I always wonder where is the convoy. I don't know if you saw convoy in the visuals that was played. You saw 1 or 2 or 3 vehicles, that convoy, a military convoy. In fact, one media outfit was 5 miles long, and we only see 1 armored personnel carrier or 2.
By that, are you saying that it does not amount to mutiny?
I think there is a calculated attempt at disinformation, and it's a very dangerous defense that international media has gotten into. Because, you see, modern warfare, it's not only about armament, it's about the mind control too. It's also about, you know, that's the word, simply. It's not just propaganda. You know, initially it was propaganda, but outright falsehood is disinformation.
Okay. But are you saying it doesn't amount to mutiny? No, the action?
You see,
it's not an insurrection. Is that your submission?
What was Yevgeny Prigozhin asking for? He said for the sack of the military chief. Why? Because the immediate reason was that he ordered an airstrike that killed some of his troops, or the members of the Wagner group. That was the primary thing. Of course, over time.
Are you trying to say that the action he took was justifiable, or being that he's notorious for such is accepted?
No, the first thing I'm saying is that what was the goal of that purported mutiny? Yeah. I don't agree it's a mutiny anyway. But let's agree it's a mutiny. What was the goal? What was the stated goal? It was that the defense chief should be sacked. There was never an attempt to go to the Kremlin or to march on the Kremlin. That is why, for me, I am certain, and of course, time is a revealer, that what happened was theatrics. And it is to really divert attention from an impending action by Putin. Because I am certain, because the real issue at stake, if nobody's talking about the Ukraine crisis anymore, is now Prigozhin.
Attention has not been shifted.
Yeah, so I think it's...
Which is like a deliberate act.
Yeah, so
you are trying to concur with Emmanuel Obakpolo.
And of course, Dr. Neville, too, that, you know, the idea that there was really a coup that was coming, No, by no means. What I have seen, in fact, people were apprehensive. I told them, let's talk. On Saturday morning, when the issue was very hot, you know, the whole world was, Putin is in trouble. Is it the end of Putin? I said, end of what? Putin that could carry out what he calls a special military exercise. That was a direct affront on the NATO alliance. The US, the European Union, some of these Baltic and former USRO states, all are members of this NATO alliance, Turkey inclusive. Russia alone has stood up against them for over a year. That special military exercise started February 12, 2022. And today is June 27th. So we are talking about lasted for 1 year and over 4 months. Almost 5 months now. That's not, it is not a country that can retain or sustain that kind of a challenge against. NATO is the largest, by far, combined though, is by far the largest military alliance anywhere in the world. NATO. If you see the cost of the war so far, in terms of weaponry, in terms of armament, in terms of funding, in terms of training, in terms of equipment, military hardware that have been supplied by the NATO, US, UK, France, and other NATO members to Ukraine, the sheer quantum is in trillions of dollars.
Okay.
So a country that has stood that long against that kind of assault or affront, it's not a country that its creation, the Wagner Group, can overrun. Even though what the West was celebrating was that when the enemy, if the home front of your enemy is in crisis, what it does is that it distracts it from the war ahead of it.
Yes,
you can say that it was more or less.
That could be like a setback.
Yes. Well, what we eventually saw was that it was a flash in the pan, because it started Saturday morning by 4 p.m. Nigerian time on Saturday. That same Saturday, it was clear that the man was said to have accepted that Yevgeny Prigozhin was said to have accepted amnesty and was going to go on exile to Belarus, physically.
Okay,
that is the key Russian ally.
Yeah.
Alexander Lukashenko's Belarus is Russia's key ally. It's the only country that openly supported and added troops and allowed them to use their bases in the special military exercise in Ukraine. So I have not seen anything that the hula baloo or it's about or.
Okay,
or
let's
excitement.
analyze what Vladimir Putin said concerning investigating this and ensuring that punishment will be meted out, to the Wagner leadership. Looking at that, some have also said that it is also possible that the Wagner group will be infiltrated by the opposition, to speak against or act against, the Russian government or the Russian military. Aren't you seeing that in what is building up?
No, you look at it. The Wagner group is a creation of Putin's Russia. It is like what you call the RSF in Sudan now. It is like a paramilitary group created to support the activities of the Russian army. And they are doing it with a special purpose vehicle. There are exercises that the military want to carry out. For example, the Russian Wagner group is currently in at least 5 countries in Africa.
Yeah, in Africa.
Mali, Central African Republic, even in Sudan. They are involved in about 5 countries in Africa. The Wagner group is in Syria. Mm-hmm. The Wagner group is fighting in Ukraine. It was like, it gives it a cover of immunity from persecution by the International Criminal Court, the Russian army. But now, what has Putin said in his speech he gave earlier today? He said the Wagner group fighters have 3 options. Option 1 is that they enlist formally into the Russian army. Yeah. Option 2 is that they go home. Option 3, they go on exile to Belarus. That's somebody who is clearly in charge. In fact, the people are even saying that it's all a plan to take the governor of one of the regions, who was the former defense chief, to come back as defense chief so that he can lead another. Because in 2012, when they took over the Donetsk region, you know, of Ukraine, this same person was basically in charge. So all these ones, people even say that the idea is to, okay, eventually they remove the defense chief and bring him back. Because he was successful in 2012, perhaps in 2023, he can also lead a successful decimation or capture of a Ukrainian territory. Okay. So for me, I'm not seeing anything.
Let's get your reaction over this, Emmanuel Obakwolo, as we look at the possible threats that this may pose and dangers it may pose, you know, in the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, I don't see any threats. I don't see any danger. I maintain my position that I only see a situation where somebody is acting the script of another, like I earlier said in my introduction. Because if you look at the situation, Moscow is not being threatened at all.
It's untouched.
There's no atom, and the Wagner group is not a group that can run through Moscow. It's just not possible. It's not something that can be imagined. Because if you look at the Wagner group, the question I asked is, who is Wagner group? And to my mind, Wagner group is Putin. Because the man is in charge. The man is only using that group as an extension of himself.
Of his army.
Yes. Because everything, the commandments, the military orders given to the Wagner group is from Putin. And I don't see, though in his speech he tagged them traitors, and he ended at that. So when there is something serious and the like of Putin can only make a statement in his speech to say, oh, they were traitors, and he stopped at that without taking a further step to see that discipline is given to those traitors. Like
means he's taking it lightly.
Yes. Then you need to ask yourself some questions. Now, he succeeded in giving them options. And look at the options. The options are around him, under his watch, and by extension to an ally of his, who is also under his watch.
Of course, yes.
So it's dangerous. Even if it is true that it was a mutiny, it was an attempt at his leadership, and the option is go under my watch in Belarus, I do not think it's something the Western world should take serious. Instead, the Western world should be more watchful and careful. Because Putin is not a man that you can overcome with the wave of a hand. It's just not possible.
Okay.
Whether any person believes it or not, Russia is still among the superpower.
Okay, let's look at the possible threats that this group could have, you know, in Africa, because we have it that it's already spreading tentacles in Africa. What do you see as possible threats to the African continent?
Africa, unfortunately, Africa is a community where anything goes. And our leadership is not careful of what goes around her. Perhaps because they stand to benefit more. That is the unfortunate aspect of it.
Stand to benefit more
from
the crisis that may abound? Stand
to benefit more.
Okay.
And even at times, some of the agreements signed with some of these international communities,
yes,
the people are not privy to it. Once the protection goes around the leader, it's deemed that every other person is protected. That is how Africa is. But you see, the Western world, the protection of the state is paramount. And they don't look at an individual. However, in Russia, the protection of Putin is the protection of Russia also. Because the man sees himself as a demigod over the people of Russia and Russia.
Okay.
So where you have that kind of situation, the man is so intelligent to the extent that he has put everything down in place to secure himself, secure Russia. And that is why you see even the United Nations is careful, because the United Nations does not want a repeat of what transpired in the Second World War. Because the Second World War was as a result of tricky, careless politics they were played, and it resulted to the Second World War. So, but in this instance, they are more watchful, because any attempt you strike Putin, Putin will strike back. And what that portends, it portends that there is going to be the already anticipated Third World War. So they are careful to see how that could be prevented. And while that is on, Putin himself is coming out with his own schemes. Now he has brought another scheme. The attention of all the world now is towards the Wagner group issue with him, as he is claiming. But that is not really the issue there. The issue there is that the man wants to see how this mind, how he could strike and nobody will notice it. Just like what Adolf Hitler did during the Second World War. There were times he struck, nobody noticed until people began to say, no, we cannot begin to fight among ourselves. By
creating a distraction.
Yes, we cannot. Let us really investigate who is really behind all of this. I think that is the kind of method Putin wants to take. I
would like you to have your reactions over this as it spills over Africa and the possible threats of the Wagner group in Africa, and of course also tied to, the China as a country, because Russia has boasted that China is with it, and even after this rebellion, China is also strengthening ties with it, And again, the issue of fighting Ukraine, China seems not to be condemning it. Now, what's your take in all of this?
My take is that the world that we live in, this present global world, is a world that is dominated by various powers. One of such powers is the United States. Another is the People's Republic of China, PRC, and then the Russian Federation. There are other countries like India, like Pakistan, like Nigeria, like South Africa,
European Union,
Brazil,
European Union. Are you taking away the EU?
International governmental organization. That's when we talk about those unions.
Okay.
Like a European Union, even the United Nations. The fact is that the international system is complex, and a relationship within this international system is determined by the idea of statism. That's why you have states everywhere. And so each state, on the basis of the theory of realism, which is realpolitik, they have their own interest to promote. And this interest is usually determined by a number of factors and a number of actors. In the case of Russia, the national interest of the Russian Federation is determined by Vladimir Putin and his allies who are in the bureaucracy, military bureaucracy and public bureaucracy of the Russian Federation. They determine the policies of Russia that are put together that we refer to as national interest, which they use their foreign policy to pursue. Now, this realism is based on survival of the state first.
Okay.
Survival of the interest of the state second. Survival and the stability of the state third. Then the state can resort to self-help. In an attempt to want to get help from international governmental organization, and the help is not forthcoming, the state, resort to self-help. And so what the Russian Federation is doing is that by the fact that the United States and our allies are trying to spread their military alliances to the eastern part of Europe and up to the Pacific, the South Pacific region, they are trying to alter the peace that was entered into after the Second World War. And they lay foundation, according to Vladimir Putin, for catastrophic use of weapons of mass destruction, which he said that his country is ready to use.
He's ready to use.
Yes. Now, you talk about Africa, you talk about the Wagner Group. And that was why I deliberately used the word national interest and foreign policy to reply you. The question is now, as Russia as they have their own foreign policy trust, that have the toga of economy, that have the toga of politics, toga of marketing of their culture, and the element of imperialism, which we are seeing in Ukraine. Other countries like the United States and China, don't they have the same thing? They have. And if you hear that China is in alliance with close alliance with Russia, one of the reasons is because China is also planning to annex Taiwan back to China mainland.
So it has its ulterior motive.
Yes, and Russia is just trying to test the waters to see international reaction so that they can also go back to Beijing and look for a way to want to reintegrate Taiwan into the Chinese Federation. Now, when you talk about Africa, that is the foreign policy of China. The foreign policy of China, one of the cardinal objective of the current foreign policy of the Chinese communist country, of the Chinese communist state, is reuniting Taiwan to the mainland China, just as the foreign policy trust of the Russian Federation is reuniting the old republics of the defunct USSR back into an umbrella body that is dominated and led by Russia. Now let's go to Africa. We have Africa continent of about how many? About 50-something countries.
54.
The question is, are they organized individually as nation states to pursue their national interest without relying on the apron string of these other countries that we have mentioned just now? They cannot. And so their foreign policy trust, no matter how well intentioned, how well crafted, they bow to the whims and caprices of the domineering foreign policy objective of the United States and our allies, of Russia, of China, and of any other powerful country. So if you hear, for instance, that there are conflicts in Africa, and you hear that the Wagner groups are here because of the conflict, it is because of the way and manner the African leaders have managed the affairs of their country, and they made themselves vulnerable because they have, even though global capitalist system have weakened their own economy and their own state, and the capacity of the state to react to issues that have to do with governance, issues that have to do with social relations and the rest of them, sharing of power, the rest of them, they themselves collaborate with the international community through collaboration with corporations, international corporations that operate in their countries, and they further make the capability of their state to be weak. The such state cannot pursue any foreign.
You made mention of the Third World War, and there is need for us to really be very careful, as countries of the world, what this may be promoting could excite such actions. Now, in 15 seconds, Ibrahim Momo, in your closing remarks, what's your advice in terms of avoiding anything that has to do with a push to the Third World War?
Well, quickly, I would say that everybody needs to exercise restraints. There's nothing that Russia is doing today that the U.S. is not doing currently and he has been doing. U.S. invaded Afghanistan. The U.S. ally, Israel, has invaded Palestine. The U.S. invaded Iraq, invaded Libya, and deposed. In fact, U.S. went to Nicaragua, deposed the sitting president, brought him to the U.S., charged him for drug offenses, jailed the sitting president in the U.S. There's nothing that Russia...
That's the world police. And they are living up to that.
There's nothing that the Russia Federation is doing today that the U.S. is not guilty of 100 times over. So our people, our viewers must at least go beyond what the CNN of this world are telling us to look at the core issues,
Okay,
the background to this community. So I think that in a bid to prevent a third world war, all states, particularly the most powerful states, the US and its allies in NATO, must exercise maximum restraint.
Okay.
We talk about, just one more sentence. We talk about what Russia, the Wagner group is doing in Africa. Go and find out every state Wagner group is involved in. We are states that France has been putting and removing leaders at will, controlling their central bank, controlling their economies. All those countries in Africa.
Thank you for your articulation in that. Well, I give you 15 seconds, but I just hope you won't exceed that. Emmanuel,
I think the world powers should learn how to respect the sovereignty of states.
The states, yeah.
And also allow states to protect their territory and not them breaking in at will and begin to dictate for sovereign states. And also, in particular to African leaders should not be, they should not see themselves, because already they projected themselves as an extension of the colonialism. They are now local colonial masters, even to their people.
Okay.
So they should see that the state is superior to every other person.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Please, Neville, apply restraint not to exceed 20 seconds. Your closing remarks.
My closing remark is that the Third World War is already here. It may not necessarily be a shootout war, but when we have global impact of the war, to the extent that that is now affecting prices of goods and services around the world,
it's a form of war.
We are in a war situation. The world is in a war situation.
An economic war.
Yes, and just now, we need, after recovery from COVID-19, the world needs some forms of global good governance that will spread across the nooks and crannies of the world, for the people of the world to enjoy the benefits of the world that God has given to them.
Thank you very much, Neville Obakedo. Big thanks, Emmanuel Obakpolo, and of course, Ibrahim Momo. And just wish you a beautiful day ahead of you. And big thanks to our viewers as well. We do the same time next week. From me and the rest of us, it's goodbye.